I have the pleasure of introducing Swami Brahmavidananda ji, my guru. Swamiji is a traditional and contemporary teacher of Vedanta and founder, of course, like I said, of Arsha Vidya Foundation. He's been teaching now for more than 35 years, and he's impacted the lives of various groups of people, whether it's students of Vedanta, seekers, youth, corporates, professionals. He's impacted all our lives. He is acknowledged as a significant Mahatma by his own guru, Pujya Swami Dayanand Saraswati ji, whom we just heard. Swami Brahmavidananda studied the Gita, the Upanishads, and the Brahma Sutras in Sandipani from 1976 to 1978, also inspired by Swami Chinmayananda ji. He spent an austere 7 years in Rishikesh studying advanced Vedanta texts with Swami Taranandagiri ji and Swami Harihara Tirtha ji. He took to Vedanta full time post his career as a marine engineer. After hearing all this, you will know that you can't mess with Swamiji intellectually. Well, I can tell you, you can't mess with him physically also, because he's an exponent of karate, tai chi, and the Shaolin martial arts. He is a man full of compassion and has a deep understanding of the working of the human mind. For me and my family, he's been a guiding light over the last 15 years, and we owe a lot to him. Friends, let me hand you over to the very, very capable hands of Swami Brahmavidananda ji.
Thank you, Suresh. Let me get straight into the topic with a small prayer. Om Sadashiva Samarambham Shankaracharya Madhyama Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam. The topic for today is, what is the purpose of Vedic wisdom? We all hear this term, we all want to know this, but what are we after? Do we really want this wisdom? Or, will I get a job because of this? No, you won't. Will you make some money with this? Well, if you apply some of the principles, you'll be competent to make money. But directly, no. Unless you want to start your own religion, then probably you could. Not otherwise. So what is the purpose? Those of you who came in early heard my teacher short some time back, few minutes ago. So I will build up on that idea. Vedic wisdom is not something like physics, chemistry, economics, which is affecting one part of your life, one aspect of your life. Vedic wisdom is connected with you and what you want. Let's examine this a bit. What exactly does a human being want? Universally. Universally. Whether you are in a developing country like India or in an advanced developed country like USA, a tribal society in some island, wherever you are, the human being is a self-conscious human being. Self-consciousness, self-awareness is the highest in human being. Though I accept there are a lot of people without much self-awareness. But still, compared to all other life forms available for us, known to us, we are very self-aware. And the self that we are aware of, we are not very happy with. not totally acceptable. We feel vulnerable. We feel threatened. The world is so large, and I am such a small entity here. Therefore, there's always an attempt on the part of a human being, irrespective of the culture or civilization he is, for two main pursuits. We classify it in the Vedic wisdom as Artha and Kama. Or if those of you who are in modern education and are familiar with Maslow's theory, your safety needs, hierarchy of needs, if you're talking of Maslow. It's your safety requirements. You need to feel safe. You need a house of your own, for example. Well, first test, you want to feel safe. I get to my house, lock the door, I'm safe. And look at all that we do to make it safe. I move from a standalone building into a gated community. Right? It's better security. I have a CCTV on my door. Peepholes, padlocks, the chain to open and see. All that is what? Artha. You want to feel safe, sense of security. You go to Amazon, look at all the EDCs available, self-defense equipment available. From karambits to pepper sprays to mace to guns. Why? Because I'm insecure as a human being. People take time in a relationship to really build up that relationship because they are afraid of being vulnerable. And sometimes you end the relationship. Why? I'm afraid the other person will end it and I'll get hurt. So I better end it so that all coming from your need for artha, the need to feel safe. Once you have a relative degree of that artha, the other need comes up, kama. To be comfortable, to be happy. A house is not only for security needs. I want to do it up with my taste. I want to leave my imprint on it. My taste about it. Why? Because then that's my desire, kama. What is the use of an empty house? I want somebody to share it with. Kama, relationships. Then I'll be happily ever after. All of you know how much is that happily ever after thing. Children. Kama. Half the things that you have in your house are not really for sense of security or need. They're kama, desires. In fact, some olden things which were practical, no more practical, like the old hand grinders that we had, is now kept as a piece in your sitting room. Why? Feels nice, it's a decorative piece now. So it's got some antique value. Your grandmother used it for practical value, okay, to make dosas for you. All this is an expression of the need for kama. But as a society, you will never be able to fulfill your artha and kama unless there is a base of dharma, the rule of law. Vyasa, writing the Mahabharata 5,000 years ago, says that with uplifted arms I declare that from dharma alone can there be artha and kama. a modern businessman, successful businessman, echoes it in a very simple manner by saying good ethics is good business. Right? If you follow certain ethical thing, you will be able to build up a business which lasts. You will make profit by a quick raid in the market and cheating people, but it won't last because people are also smart. So dharma becomes a base. Yesterday we saw elaborately what dharma is about, how you can get the maximum happiness in life, normal living, only if you base your artha and kama pursuits on the base of dharma. You have to base it on dharma. Universal ethics for the time being, in a simple manner. Universal, not merely cultural. All right, fine. That much I can understand. All right. But the human being requires more than that. That's why the question will always come up. Why do good things happen to bad people? Or why do bad things happen to good people? Why, if you're a good person, bad things cannot happen. So the certain what is good, what is bad is highly relative anyway. The words themselves are judgmental words, very relative in application. Somebody says the pandemic was bad. Why? My industry is, I can't, for 3 months I had to keep it idle. We are suffering losses. Another person says it was good for me. Why? I'm manufacturing sanitizers. It was good for me. I made lots of money. And of course, I'm helping people also, you know. So good, bad, relative. So, and if you have achieved a certain degree of success, definitely, this question will come up. What is the purpose behind the whole thing? What am I really after in life? There will be enough moments in your life where life will give you a chance to think about it. The pandemic has given a lot of chances for people to rethink their purpose in life. You had a choice of being paranoid about it or rethink about it. Many people are paranoid and some have started thinking about what is my purpose behind the world. This is just to grow and fulfill my desires, have some relationships, have some children, and then finally, bye-bye. Bye-bye, where are you going? I don't know. Where did you come from? I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of religious beliefs about all that thing, but I don't know. And with a modern secular education, either you'll say, I don't know, I don't believe in all that thing. Or you'll say heaven, hell, etc. Because the Hindu influence is off from our education anyway. So what is the purpose? What are you living your life for? All of us asked these questions when we were teenagers. All of us asked. This was a teenage angst we all had. Then it got diverted into other things. Boyfriends, girlfriends, having fun in life, careers, they got buried under all that. But the fundamental question still remains in every heart. So then Upanishad comes and makes a statement here. Atmanastu kamaya sarvam priyam bhavati. Everything you enjoy, just so that you are being happy. Why do you want? Why do you want to feel secure? I'm secure. The sky above, the earth below. I got in touch with my vulnerability long back. I confronted death. Now, no problem. I'm secure. Swamiji, that's why, because you are a sadhu. Okay, we are not like that. But why do you want to be feel secure? Then I can be comfortable, happy with myself. Why do you want all those objects of enjoyment? Then I can be happy. Why do you want the dharma and the rule of law, etc.? Because then it won't be a jungle, and we all can achieve what we want. And what do you want to achieve? So many things. For what? That I can be happy. At least I will be free from all these insecurities, from this unhappiness, from this lack that I feel as a human being. So many things I have accumulated in life. I mean, when I get it, it's great. That new house, when I got it, was great. I said, Lord, thank you. I will not ask you for anything anymore. Then I lived in it for a week and I have started discovering all the limitations. This should have been like that. That vastu is not correct. This is not correct. That corner is open to leaking. And what happened to your happiness? New relationship. You got into that feeling of love. Wow. You're walking on air. Figuratively, of course, not literally. Otherwise, it'll be like this story of this man who goes and asks this girl, sweetheart, my dear, please tell me those 3 words that'll make me walk on air. And she turns around and tells him, go hang yourself. Go hang yourself. That's not what we are looking for. So, new relationship, you felt great. Everything perfect. Then what? What happened after that? So you felt good in the relationship, you felt close to the person, you felt comfortable, be vulnerable, to show your true sides, and then all the fights start. If you survive those fights, you have a relationship. Otherwise, I love you becomes I love you. You go your way, I go my way. That's why psychologists and all always say love is hard work. Love is not hard work. Relationship is hard work. Love is love. It's beautiful wherever you find it. So, where is that fulfillment I'm looking for? I thought I will get it in all this. The new car. Why? Because I make a judgment about myself through my car. I have a nice Ferrari, bright red color. Everyone look at me and say, oh, wow, what a successful man. What do you feel? Yeah, Ferrari, but I can take it out only on a Sunday and then also only on the expressway. And by the time I get off the expressway, I'm stuck in the jam with the Fiat taxi next door. And one scratch on the Ferrari is like a scratch on me. Really, give the guy a choice. With this nail that I have in my hand, I will give a scratch on your Ferrari or on your hand. Which do you prefer? Its identification with the Ferrari is so much. One scratch on that upsets him. Not that he wants a scratch on his hand either, but he knows this will heal by itself. That I'll have to spend a lot of money to heal. So, after some time, what? Like Dolby in the game of, no, what is that? The Hobbit. He'll have to say, bring it out, look at it and say, my precious. So precious. He'll know it, and then keep it locked up again. The whole thing goes like this in your life. Your child has become teenager and started rebelling against you. Where is that kid that gave you joy? So you start looking at old photographs. They're only memories now. Where is that joy? I mean, rebellion, I'm very happy when kids rebel. Why? That shows their independent thinking is coming up. I'll be worried if they didn't rebel. In the sense that if the rebellion doesn't come in teenagers, it'll come when they're 25, 30. Problematic. They're starting their careers at that. If it doesn't come up, they'll come at 45, 50. Bigger issues. Bigger issues. If it doesn't come up there, they'll remain submissive all their lives. Big problem. Big problem. Yeah. Therefore, too, what I'm trying to say is that all your pursuits does not free you from the sense of limitation that you seem to have. Nor can you be comfortable with that sense of limitation. Instinctively, you rebel against it. Everyone is a rebel. That's why when a leader, political or spiritual, becomes rebellious and he talks aggressively, assertively, everyone appreciates him. Why? Because it strikes a chord with the rebel in you. You may be the most orthodox character, no rebellion, but you're rebelling against your own sense of limitations. Can't avoid that. It's instinctive. Whether you want a Ferrari or something else was a desire that you chose. But this freedom that you want from your sense of limitation was not a choice that you made. It is instinctive. You see it in all life forms. In a primitive life form, it is only going towards pleasure and avoiding pain. In a refined life form, like a human being, it gets refined more, that's all, into 100 different things. But the fact is, you're rebelling against the sense of limitation that you have. The solution to that is presented in the Upanishads and the Gita as moksha, your fourth purushartha, the ultimate purushartha in life. Moksha means freedom. Freedom from what? From your sense of limitation as a human being. That you're a human being itself becomes a problem. That's why sometimes we fantasize, I wish I could fly like a bird in the sky. Romanticizing, that's all, nothing more. All the English romantic poets that you studied in school. What is this life full of care? We have no time to stand and stare, no time to stand beneath the boughs and stare as long as sheep and cows. Why do you want to be a sheep and a cow? I don't understand. That I don't understand. Why do you want to be a sheep or a cow? You're a human being. But romanticizing, fantasizing about freedom from your sense of limitation. You project that the cow is not limited as you are. In fact, the cow feels more limited. Therefore, this freedom from a sense of limitation that every human seems to suffer from is called moksha. That is the ultimate purpose of Vedic wisdom. So for moksha, should we become sannyasis? Can I lead a family life and have moksha? Can I be successful in my corporate life and have a moksha? That particular dimension of this knowledge, my Guru Bhai, Jonas, will speak in the evening today. That he'll speak in the evening today. Right now, let us have a look at what is this moksha. And in this analysis, we have seen up to now, it's implicit there, but I'll spell it out, that it is no more a problem with what I have, but it is a problem with what I see myself to be. What I am, what I take myself to be. Because whether I have more or less, the sense of limitation is there. Take someone like Bill Gates. You think he doesn't have a sense of limitation? Half his life is spent in getting that money. And the now next half is spending in giving it away. Why there's greater joy in giving it away. That is true. After the achiever, the giver has to come up in a human being. And when you learn to be a giver, then really speaking, the seeker in you emerges. And what is the seeker? The one who's really seeking for this freedom from your sense of limitations. What I have will always be limited. What I have will always be limited. Even the world's richest man is always now that little bit the title keeps shifting up and down between 3-4 people. All of them also. They may have enough for lifetimes, but it is still a limited amount. $150 billion is a limited amount. It seems huge. It is huge. It is almost the budget of a small country. But budget of a small country. It's not the Indian budget. Definitely not the American budget. It's still small, it's still finite. Oh, what about the American budget? It's still finite. It's a number, no? Measurable. If it is a measurable number, it is still finite. So with this position that we are in, it is not what we have that matters. It's what I am, what I take myself to be that matters. Therefore, from trying to become somebody, we start examining what we are, what I have taken myself to be. I have taken myself to be this. At the same time, I am rebelling against this. If I was really something, like for example, every 6 hours I feel hungry. Sorry, every 4 hours. Feel hungry. Is that a matter for complaining? Do you complain that every 6 hours I have to eat something? You will complain if there is no food available for you. But that you feel hungry is not a matter for complaint. Why? Because that's natural. You have accepted it. You don't go to your doctor and say, doctor, I don't know what's wrong with me. Every 6 hours I feel hungry. If you don't, you will go to your doctor and say, bhook hi nahi lag raha. What is natural is not a matter for complaint. It's not something you will rebel against. something you'll be happy with. In fact, because we live sedentary lives, we'll say, I have to go and do something to work up an appetite now. You can enjoy my meal. Now tell me, you struggle against your sense of limitation or not? So it shouldn't be your nature. And there are always times in life when you have experienced your true nature, which the Upanishad says is nothing but completeness, fullness. You are going by Uber, worried क्या हो जाएगा यार, ये pandemic है, ये है, वो है, कभी business will pick up, when all that you're worried about. And in the neighboring car, you see a gurgling baby making faces at you from the window. And you look at that and you start laughing, feel happy, so joyful, so sweet, so cute, so nice. You feel very happy seeing that. What happened? Did you plan to be happy? You experience joy. I was walking on the streets. रास्ता पर जा रहा था. भेलपुरी नहीं खाता था. रास्ता पर जा रहा. Walking on the road. Bombay Road. And suddenly between two buildings, I see that full moon there. Ah. I was longing for something. I got that. Wow. Experientially. In all these moments, do you experience your limitations? You really experience your limitation in all these moments? Afterwards, they'll come back. Don't worry. Afterwards, they'll come back. That is natural. Because you don't know what you really are. It's experiential. And all experiences are finite. Let me give you even a bigger example. Here's this guy. Okay. Morning is all getting ready, husband, wife getting ready to work, etc. Oh, they're all busy with things. And just before he has to leave, his wife gives him a file. What is this? Divorce papers. Please sign. Please sign. By evening, I want this signed. Says, but divorce, why? Can we talk about it at least? There's nothing to talk. I have made up my mind. Complete blindsided. I don't have time. Okay, I'm going to work. But at least can we come back in the evening and talk about this? There's nothing to talk. Worried, upset, shocked. He's driving to work. He enters. The boss tells him something, and that deflected anger comes against his boss. Boss says, okay, if that's how you feel, quit right now. Yeah, 3 months, we'll give you a check for your 3-month wages, quit. Half an hour to clear your desk. At least his wife gave him till evening. He takes up everything down back. Personal life in MS, professional life in MS. Driving home, angry, upset, sad, worried. Meets with an accident, wakes up in the hospital. And his friend gets a call. So he says, on hospital. Oh, the friend rushes to hospital to cheer him up. And he hears this whole story. The guy has got 2 cracked ribs and leg is in a cast. Tell me, what can the friend say to cheer him up? Personal life gone, professional life gone, health also in a mess. Can he say, it is not so bad, etc.? What is not bad? So, like a typical man, he does what men will do. He cracks a PJ. And the guy there starts laughing. And then he removes his ropes, he's holding his ropes, but still laughing. Where did that experience of joy and fulfillment come in? Is there anything to laugh about in his life? Is there anything to be happy about in his life? Nothing. But experientially, he still had it. Experientially, it is still there. So where did it come from? Swamiji, happiness after all is an inside job. Yeah, inside job. Yeah, in a nice frame of mind, become happy. Na? So have happy all the time. Na? Why do you want this thing, that thing, that thing, that thing? Have a nice frame of mind all the time. Yeah, Swamiji, I'll be a yogi. Always sit in samadhi. No thought. We'll be happy. Na? How many yogis sit in samadhi all day anyway? None that I know of. And I know a few. One day I sat in samadhi for 13 days. And when I woke up, I found all people around me and they all declared me a wise man. One great spiritual leader says that. Nice guy. But he's not sitting in samadhi before or after that, only that time. So, you cannot be always in samadhi. In fact, he's lucky that he got away with the 13 days. Normally, the tradition in India is you see somebody sits in samadhi for 3 days, you'll break a coconut on his head and build a nice samadhi around it. Let him be there, embalmed like that. It'll be very good for the environment around. At least one guy will stop disturbing everyone. If nothing. I mean, that's a tradition in India, okay? And my students are welcome to do the same with me, okay? So, nobody can sit like that forever. And you will sit in samadhi and come out and you will find the same miserable world where self-judgments will start. Then what? Inside, what is there? Inside job. Mind is there. If you're looking inside body, nothing can be a source of ananda. Liver, heart, kidneys. They're not sources of ananda. They are doing their function. As long as they're doing their function, you're okay. Even the little bit compromise, you're still okay. But that's all. They're functional. Inside mind. The mind has got lot of bhusa inside, lot of junk inside. You don't have to junk the mind, only junk the junk inside. Okay. So outside in the world, there's nothing called happiness. There is no object called happiness. There is no time called happiness. What about happy hours? Happy hours are for them, not for you. Why? They increase their sales by getting you to start drinking earlier. And you feel happy because you're getting some concession in the cost of it. That's all. Or but you forget you're drinking 2 drinks extra because of that. You're spending more money and plus damaging yourself more. So, what is happy hours? No time, no place. Swamiji, but your ashram in Rishikesh, what a place. Ask the locals. Every time I go to Rishikesh, some local or the other will approach me. Samji, आप Bombay से है ना? You're from Bombay, no? Yeah. Will I get a job in Bombay? I know how to drive. And always my response is standard, just to check out whether what I'm saying is true or not. Wow, why do you want to leave this place? Such a beautiful place, this paradise on earth. Why do you want to leave this and come to Bombay? Bombay to Mayapuri hai. The Swamiji, what is there here? Mountain is there, river is there, nothing else. No money, no comfort, nothing. So he doesn't think that place is a great place. And if like me, you have stayed there for 7 years before the ashram came up, you will know, we all know it's not a great place. Why? Winter it is freezingly cold. Summer it is hot. You can fry eggs on the rocks outside. Rainy season is flooded out. Malarial right through except in winter. Every year I got malaria when I was there. No. What's great about a place? What's great about a time? What's great about an object? What's great about a person? The same person that will give you a lot of joy will also give you a lot of heartburn. Anyone in a relationship knows that. Married, you know that even better. I mean, I know all of you are happily married, but still you know that very well. It's not constant joy. Let me tell you one thing. Every working man or woman looks for an out-of-station trip. Why? To have a break. The secret that nobody has told you. Some break I get. Break from what? From the people you love. Yeah, you need a break. It's fine. It's natural. In this situation, where is the joy coming from? Inside? Inside we saw all mind, etc. It's neither inside nor outside. In the vision of Vedanta, it is yourself. And discovery of this is what we call moksha. Moksha is not a state. It's not a state of being. It's not a state of becoming. It's a state of discovering that you are the source of all joy in the world. That you are Ananda is what moksha is about. The ultimate purpose of Vedic wisdom is to discover this. In between, there will be a lot of things. How to develop your competency, how to develop your balance in life. All that is there. How to live by dharma, how to use dharma to fulfill artha and kama. All that is there. But what is the ultimate purpose? The ultimate purpose is the ultimate purpose in your life. To discover what you really are. So from one who's seeking, from a seeker, in fact, one religious leader said this. We are not religion. We don't have religion. We are seeking. We are a nation of seekers. Ultimately, from seeking, we have to shift to knowing, to wanting to know. From a mumukshu, the term used in Sanskrit is a jignasu, one who wants to know himself or herself. So the only question worth asking or answering in Vedanta is, who are you then? To encapsulate the whole thing in a nutshell. Who are you? I'm so and so. There was a name given to you without consulting you. Otherwise, you really think you will want a name like one of my friends has, Mukkavelli Veeravankata Satyarama Narayana Murthy. I'm not joking, this is his name. You really think you'll want a name like that? Some of your names, I mean, I'm sure many people are unhappy with their names. Even when you take sannyasa, you think you're consulted to giving a name? No. Your guru gives you the name. And you in good grace, you say, oh. Like for sannyasa, we have a dip in the river. Cold Ganga is Shivratri time. Then you come out, bare body, you're given your clothes to wear and say, it gives you. My guru gave me my name and then say, good name, na? I was saving it for you. I say, yes, what I'm saying is your name, you're not consulted, whether it is as a sannyasi or as a normal person. As a baby, you are given your name. Swamiji, what you see is what you get. I'm the body. Really? Are you really the body? It's your body, all right. Because sometimes you say, I am. Body sits, I sit. Body talks, I talk. Body walks, I walk. I am body. And sometimes you'll tell me, my body is very sore, Swamiji. Hey, what happened? Yesterday I had such a workout in the gym. Gym's opened up and after a long time I'm going. Such a workout. My whole body is paining. What did you say? My whole body is paining. I and mine. Is it you? Mine and I cannot be the same. My phone, but I do ever say iPhone? Unless you have an Apple iPhone, okay? But it is my phone, all right. But I'm not the phone. An object of mine cannot be an object of I. My body. My body. Not I body. Same way with my mind. My mind, not I mind. My knowledge. My ignorance. Not you. You're the one who's aware of the whole thing, conscious of the whole thing. At any given time, you're conscious of your body, of your mind. At the most, you may have to pay some attention. Your energy, I'm low energy, high energy. I'm aware of my knowledge. I'm aware of my limitations of my knowledge. I'm aware of my ignorance. None of them I really am. I'm independent of all of them. Yeah, they all depend on me. My body depends upon me because I use the body. I nurture the body. I take care of the body. Body is dependent on me. I am independent of the body. Mind is dependent on me. I am conscious of the mind. I use the mind. I develop it as I want to. Mind is dependent on me. I am independent of the mind. Same thing with my knowledge, my ignorance, everything. Who's that I? I'm the one that is conscious of all this. That means what should be your nature? Nothing but consciousness. In the vision of Vedanta, you're nothing but pure consciousness. And this consciousness we are seeing is the source of all joy and things like that. All joy and fulfillment, therefore called Ananda. Ananda is nothing. Joy is nothing but the limitlessness that you are coming up. Consciousness cannot be limited by time or space. Simple. I have a few minutes, there's enough time. What is this thing that we call time? Let us see whether time can limit the consciousness I am. Time? Yeah, only. It's 10:58 and I have time up to 11:08. 10 minutes is a long time. Aram sir. Okay, so what is this thing that we call time? Scientifically, it's defined as a gap between two events. Olden days, events were sunrise and sunset. Now the event is two pulses of a quartz. Quartz watches that you wear? Yeah. The gap between two pulses of a quartz. But whether it's sunrise, sunset, or two pulses of a quartz, there is no event without an observer. Therefore, the gap between two events is really speaking only a gap between two observations. A conscious thought and a second conscious thought. The gap between that is called time. So when I am looking at the consciousness that I am, between the gap of thoughts, I have a concept of time. Therefore, the time is nothing but a product of your thought. It appears outside because there is something called universal which you are aware of. Something I am aware of, something that is nothing but a gap between two thoughts, cannot limit me, the one that is there in all thoughts, that there is there between the thoughts, that is there connecting up all the thoughts. That consciousness, I cannot be limited by a thought or a flow of thoughts. I cannot be limited by that. I, the consciousness, is not limited by time. And thanks to modern science, Stephen Hawking, if you are unlimited by time, you are unlimited by space itself. Because time-space continuum is one. Therefore, this limitless consciousness is what you are. And that is also called as Sat. Sat means pure existence. I have a bottle of water in my hand, right? Can you all see this? Ah, yes, now it's see. There's a bottle of water in my hand. What is this bottle? Bottle. It's only nothing but polymers. Just a polymer. Plastic bottle. Just a polymer. That is true, nothing. Because I want to see now what is this object, okay? Because the object limits me, no? This object limits me. The object is other than me. Just a polymer. What is a polymer? An arrangement of molecules. Because I want to understand the truth of this bottle. I started here. Okay. What is a polymer? A molecule, a molecular structure. A molecular structure is made up of what? Atoms. Atoms are made up of what? Particles. Particles are made of subatomic particles. What will be the final substance? You can't say nothing. I have this bottle in my hand. If I whack you with this, you will stay whacked for quite some time. Don't ask for it. I know you all are sitting safely in your homes. Okay. Where? You can't say nothing. It has to be, there has to be something that exists, but not conditioned by a form. Because the form, I'll resolve it into a further form, further form, further form. Truth of this is limitless existence. Truth of anything in the world will be limitless existence. So now there is one limitless consciousness and one limitless existence. Can they be different? There cannot be two limitless. If limitless consciousness is different from limitless existence, consciousness will become non-existence. Let it be. Let it be. I am there very much. Main hu na. I am there very much. How can you say I am not there? Therefore, what you call as existence, Sat, is nothing but Chit, consciousness, which is nothing but this limitlessness, Ananda, unconditioned by time and space. The joy and fulfillment that you seek is nothing but yourself alone. You are the joy, you are the fulfillment that you seek. Discovering this, I've given you only an insight today, in a nutshell today. There's some of my students here who have been learning from me years on this. Discovering this knowledge is the ultimate purpose, called moksha, jnanam, the ultimate purpose of Vedic wisdom, which you can gain along with all your activities in life. You don't have to be a Babaji like me, or a sannyasi like me, you don't have to be. You can live, in fact, you better live your life fully, because the growth that you need to understand this comes from dharma-based arthakama. More of that we will see in the evening with Jonas. We will see that. With this, the ultimate purpose in this. Yes, as we grow and mature, many of us are fortunate. I was blessed to have a guru. And I thought I should bring all the gurus possible in various Vedic wisdom festivals to show not only the core issues that we are discussing, that all the sadhus will be discussing, also the nuances of Vedic wisdom, the expanse of Vedic wisdom. As in the previous, this my teacher was saying, this has colored the whole culture. It's given a beauty and a fragrance to the whole culture and civilization. And in the next program of dance, you will see how this has colored dance as well, an art form, whether it's dance or sculpture or music. This wisdom has colored the whole thing. And in all of them, to remember the ultimate purpose is moksha. May not be your immediate purpose, that's fine, that's understandable. But definitely, ultimate is used in two senses, non-immediate as well as the highest possible. And I'm using it in both the senses. Okay. So people don't have to be scared. Oh, God, I'm going for Vedic wisdom and now the people will expect me to become. No, it can be your ultimate purpose. Take it at your own time. But don't keep on waiting for the right time. Okay. Otherwise, you'll be like this person who said, Mera time aa jayega. My time will come. My time will come. My time will come. He kept on saying it. And finally, one day, he was admitted to the hospital and the doctors gathered around him and said, call all the relatives because his time has come. Don't wait until then. Okay? Don't wait until then. Get it before that. Some of you, how can you joke about this? If you know the truth, life and death, you can laugh at it. Not a problem. And when death comes for you, you can say, hey, come on, I'm ready. Give me a hug. That time you don't have to worry about pandemic, okay? Social distancing. Go give death a hug. I think that's enough for now. If there are any questions, I think you can shoot. Any questions, any clarifications? Okay, let me see whether there is anything in the chat box.
Yes. Swamiji,
Yeah.
There are a couple of questions that have come in. So one of there is a preamble to the question, but the basic question is how to pursue the quest of truth without getting our baggage of wrong perceptions block our path.
Good question. Very good question. Yes, we all carry an emotional baggage. We all carry an intellectual baggage also. Carry it. Once you start attending one thing is to start attending the classes, everything, and relate to your guru, whoever he or she is. Once you relate to that person and start discussing things with the guru or the teacher, the acharya who is there, he will know what your emotional blocks are. He will know what your intellectual blocks are, and he'll help you to handle it. This is not a pursuit you do on your own. The pursuit of knowledge can never be on your own, because you need a means of knowledge to know it. Then a whole technical question, but you need a teacher to know that. Someone who has walked the path before, as they say. So you need that, and it's easy, not simple. I get students, you will be surprised at the variety of blocks and baggage my students come with. Every Vedanta teacher knows this. And we have been teaching for more than 35 years, you know it very well. With what all different stuff people come with, and they're all growing out of it, if not already grown out of it. So that's the way to go. Yeah.
Another person has asked, that I'm able to understand that my desire for objects is one of the reasons of my unhappiness. However, I'm unable to understand why I'm unhappy when others irritate, insult, stroke, abuse me. How to understand this and come out of it?
Simple. You have a desire to be treated with respect by your peers. That's part of your karma. Part of your, in psychology, we'll call it your, in Maslow's, we'll call it as your esteem needs, to be held in esteem by your peers. That is a desire, karma. That you will be respected and treated with courtesy as a human being, not more than that, but that minimum respect and courtesy as a human being will be shown to you. That's a natural desire. And others will, doesn't fit into this, you become unhappy. Therefore, one simple way of looking at it, it's more complex than that, but a simple way of that I can give you in a nutshell would be, India is a free country. Everyone has the freedom to be what they are. If that character is an insulting guy, he's an insulting guy. Give them the freedom to be, and don't allow that don't internalize that self-judgment. Say, I am not what he says I am. He may call me a fool, I'm not a fool. He's foolish enough to call me a fool. That's it. In a nutshell, okay? Can go elaborately, but in a nutshell.
Another question is, how do I develop sadhana vairagya without wavering from Guru Marga?
You mean vairagya towards the sadhana? Is that? I think that's the question
yes,
he's asking.
Yes, that's what he's asking.
Why should he waver? Okay. It's a good question in a way, because sometimes I see this in people. With great bhakti, you start doing something, and then you let it become a block because you have forgotten why you started the whole thing. The classical case would be this friend of mine, okay, acquaintance, whatever you want to call her. She used to read the Guru Charitam in Marathi regularly. Why do you need to read the Guru Charitam? So that a guru you will get. She was my next building neighbor. There's a guru in the next building. Okay, but we have seen each other since childhood, so she can't learn from me. Understandable. Because I was not the so-called sober guru that I am now when I was young. Okay, understandable. I have someone where the one local gundas were scared of. So you can imagine what I must have been. So, okay, fine, no problems. She can't study from me. But she tells another friend of ours, this time I can't attend my guru's talk, Puja Swami Dayanandji's talk. Why? Because I've taken this commitment of reading the Guru Charitam at the same time. Now, can you see, you've forgotten the purpose. You started doing the sadhana of Guru Charitam to get a guru. The guru has come, but you're not going to the guru to learn because you're stuck on the sadhana of reading the Guru Charitam. Therefore, what you need to do is, why are you doing the sadhana? Has it given you what it is meant to give you? Like churning the butter. Remember old-fashioned churning the butter? With that, you will churn using that string and the churner. Okay. Modern mixie. You're churning to get the butter. And the butter has come up, but you're still continuing churning until the butter melts back into the curd, and you'll never get it back. The same way here, keep the purpose. Keep in view what is the purpose of the sadhana. That will develop enough vairagya, enough objectivity to it, so that you will not shift from the Guru Marga. I hope I am clear enough.
There's another student who wants to know that when either you or Pujya Swamiji unfold the truth the way you have done in the last 1 hour so beautifully, we understand it in theory. So how do we realize what we know in theory about the ultimate truth? So we understand the theory, but how do we know How do we know the ultimate truth? And how do we know that we know the ultimate truth?
When you know, you will know. Like, I'm holding a pen in my hand, right? Do you have any doubt? You know that you know. Knowledge is self-validating. So when you know the truth, you will not have this doubt. That's when you know that you know. But it is true. It requires consistent learning. It requires a lot of reflection on it to clear any doubts, etc., vagueness, etc. It requires a meditation, etc., to own it up and become a part of you. Before that, you'll require some preparatory meditations, etc., some japa, etc., so that your mind is ready. A life of karma yoga, so your mind is ready. So when you do all that, one fine day you'll find, hey, everything is fine. When did everything become fine? I don't know, but right now everything is fine. I don't have any doubts anymore. I know. Nothing shakes me. I mean, I may get shaken a little bit, but I always reclaim my balance fast. You'll no more have this doubt. So if you have the doubt, Shastram Patitavyam eva, you have to study the Shastra a little bit more. Find a teacher and do that.
Okay.
Yeah.
There's another friend of ours who wants to know that in life you might have to perform some acts externally. You might have to get angry, you might have to express love, etc. So how to act and perform externally and keep calm internally? How do you project a role outside and keep calm internally?
Wow. You want to be the calm center in the storm of all activities. The way I got it. For me, my sadhana was not japa, dhyanam, etc. My sadhana was the discipline of steel, was martial arts. Calm centered, even though you are under threat. You can develop it. There are simpler ways. You don't have to get bashed up to learn it. Okay. You don't have to get bashed up to learn it. There's simpler ways. One is the life of karma yoga, prasada buddhi, ishwararpana buddhi that we talk about, accepting all the results, everything that happens in your life as prasada from Ishvara. For that understanding of Ishvara is necessary. The more you understand, the better you are at karma yoga. Developing some contemplativeness in yourself through some meditative japa dhyanam or any other meditative practice, so that your mind is contemplative, not reactive. Right now, our minds are reactive. From reactiveness, you need to get into a proactive mindset where you will act, not react. That itself is great. And along with that, if your mind also becomes a little contemplative, calmer, more peaceful, then you will not be reacting. You will do what has to be done. The guy deserves a whack. Go give him a whack. You think if I find a couple of guys harassing a girl on the road, I'm going to go, ye paap mat karo bhaiya. You think I'm going to ask that? I will diffuse the situation if possible. Yes. My first option is not war. No. Diffuse. Diffuse. You can't reason with these guys. Okay. Forget it. That part of it is all. You can't bribe them. No, forget it. That's all off. Sama and dana is off. You can diffuse. Like once it happened like that. I got into a wreck and said, stopped in front of that girl, that, "Arey beti, your father is searching for you. Come, 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 come." I pulled her into a wreck and disappeared from there. Then I told her, "Hey, where do you stay? I'll drop you home. I knew the guys were harassing you." Diffuse, you will act. And if nothing works, maybe you require to give him a whack if you are capable. Or act. Shout, chore, chore, chore. 20 people will gather. Don't say help, help, help. Nobody will help, okay? For all the ladies here, if someone is harassing you, don't shout, chore, chore. Shout, chore, chore. Don't say help, help, help. Bachao, bachao, mat bolo. Koi nahi bachane ke liye aayega. Shout, chore, chore, chore. 20 gundas will come and bash up these two guys. So, I mean, what I'm trying to say is, if your mind is non-reactive, you'll be able to do what is necessary. whack also if necessary. Therefore, life of Karma Yoga, some contemplativeness, moving from reactive to proactive and contemplative. You will get it. Did that. Take some time and effort, of course. Anything worth doing, take some time and effort.
Okay. One more question we have time for, I think,
Yeah.
is there is a gentleman who has asked us, how do we get rid of thoughts which are other than spiritual? Do we
Please
need
don't
to-
try to get rid of it. Please don't try to get rid of it. I'm going to have a cup of tea after that. What is spiritual about? Please spiritualize every thought. When you have the tree, Brahmarpanam, spiritualize. Oh Lord, thank you. Spiritualize every thought. Don't get rid of any thought. Why do you want to get rid of thoughts? When you're relating to your wife, you want to get rid of that thought and stop relating to your wife? Don't be surprised if you're blindsided and get a divorce notice. Okay? Spiritualize the whole relationship. It's beautiful. The relationship itself is a gift from the Lord. That you found somebody to love, etc. God given. The discovery of love is God given. Spiritualize the whole. That's what you do. You don't divide. This is spiritual, this is non-spiritual, and I want to have only spiritual thought. It won't work. Even for a sadhu in Rishikesh, it won't work. Why? Bhiksha jana padta na. You have to go and bhiksha. So we spiritualize that. Bhavati bhiksham dehi. The one who gives is Narayana, the one who receives is Narayana. So you spiritualize the act of eating. You will spiritualize the act of fighting also. Two divine beings are fighting. So what's the problem? Okay, I think for the time being that is fine.